to another rushed rush through the weekly rushes, where we try to give you the top news in the world of streaming and movies, but mainly movies and sometimes streaming. So this week, what have we got? We've got quite a few stories that aren't necessarily about the big screen, but about things happening off screen. The first story I'm going to share with you is regarding the Black Panther director Ryan Coogler. He was detained, believe this or not, by Atlanta police for going into a bank and requesting £12,000 be withdrawn in cash. Now, he asked for this money quietly, and he slid a piece of paper over saying, "Please be discreet." At which point the bank teller thought, because of the amount of money and the nature of the message, that he was robbing a bank. Cue, the police are called, and Ryan Coogler is in handcuffs. After a while, the confusion and the fracas is sorted. He's unhandcuffed, but obviously he's not very happy and he's not very pleased. Imagine that. It's like straight out of a movie, isn't it? That's how they used to do it in the days of Robert Redford. You walk into a bank, slide a piece of paper over, and you look, and there's a gun. But no, it was the Black Panther director, Ryan Coogler. Now, I have to confess, I thought at first, was there a race aspect to this? But interestingly, apparently, the bank teller was a black pregnant woman. So I think we can pretty much put that to the side. Another story happening off screen is Jussie Smollett. It's a very difficult name for me to say that. Jussie, you feel like you want to say Jesse, but Jussie Smollett, one of the stars of the series Empire. I don't know if you remember, he staged an assault on himself for God knows what reason, probably just to get sympathy, to get attention, to be in the spotlight. A very odd narcissistic act. But anyway, he was found guilty of 5 felony counts about 3 months ago. But he was sentenced this week, and he was sentenced to 150 days in jail with 30 months probation. Whilst the verdict and punishment was read out, Jussie Smollett was apparently in court screaming or yelling, "If anything happens to me in there, I did not do it. I am not suicidal. I am innocent." You begin to wonder whether actually he's so sort of deranged potentially that this has become his biggest role. I mean, I suppose, there's a fine line between method acting and going batshit crazy. In fact, there are some very serious examples. I think the actor Stephen Graham talked about how method acting when he was at acting college had a profound impact on his mental health. So you wonder here whether, he's almost become trapped in his own drama. I don't know if you remember, he essentially paid 2 guys who were brothers £3,500 to assault him. The judge, what did the judge say? The judge said something along these lines, which I think is probably kind of true. You really craved the attention. You wanted to make yourself more famous, throwing a national pity party for yourself. What do you think, guys? Did he deserve it? What a curious thing to want to do. I do remember years ago, my mother saying that when she was young, she had a boyfriend who went out of the front door, walked down the street, and she saw him punch himself in the face, come back and said he'd been attacked. It's that kind of thing, isn't it? Delusional fantasies. Another story, kind of off screen, could have been on screen, but never quite got on screen. The rapper and singer Cardi B was to be in a new film called Assisted Living, in which she was going to play a low-level criminal on the run when she's wrongly accused of a crime. Now, what's notable about this story is Cardi B has pulled out of the project about a week before cameras were due to roll. They say that her pullout is due to her being overextended, and I don't think that means like stretched so that she's going to ping around the room, but overextended as in her schedule. It's very close. I mean, there's not turning up to work and then there's phoning in a sickie, but at this level, with the amount of money that's involved in the insurance consequences for a huge shoot, as Deadline magazine says, when a star pulls out of a movie this late, the exit is often followed by legal action. So there's probably going to be a lot of hoo-ha, or a big hoo-ha around the costs and how they can recoup those costs. But Cardi B has essentially pulled out of her film project without so much as a goodbye or I don't even think she rang in sick. I just think she said, "I'm not turning up." She just didn't turn up. So what do you think of that? It's not very professional, is it? I mean, surely they would have known her schedule before she committed, no? I'm very excited about this next story. This next story is a TV streaming story. The BBC and the brilliant indie producers A24 are working together. They've got the rights to Shuggie, Bain, Douglas Stewart's novel that won the Booker Prize. It tells the story, and it's kind of based on the author Douglas Stewart's childhood. It tells the story of a young lad who essentially is in rundown public housing. His mother is an alcoholic. It looks at and explores his relationship with his mother, him trying to kind of overcome her drink addiction and trying to sort of, eke out a living and eke out a childhood within a really quite abusive relationship. Well, this is is going to come to the BBC. It's going to be serialised. Douglas Stewart, the author, is writing the script, and it's also produced by the same team that gave us his Dark Materials, which we didn't get around to seeing, but I heard was absolutely brilliant. Any Dune fans out there? Dune, the first film, epic in scale, sci-fi in nature, quite slow, but in creating quite a meaningful universe. The director Denis Villeneuve, I thought did a really good job. I think you have to be really committed to the genre. You need to really want to sit back. It was one of those films I really loved, the layers of character detail, but you also felt like you got the sand in your mouth, in your ears and up your nostrils. I really liked it. Well, Dune 2 is being made and is due to come out in 2023, and there's some quite exciting casting choices that have been made. Obviously, Timothée Chalamet will be coming back, Zendaya will be coming back, Rebecca Ferguson will be coming back too, and I presume hopefully we're going to see more of Josh Brolin and his rather fantabulous chin. But two new actors that are being discussed for roles in Dune Part 2 are the wonderful Florence Pugh. She's being looked at to play Princess Irulan, a daughter of Emperor Shaddam IV. I mean, I don't know all the ins and outs of this, but this is her character. But the Hollywood Reporter is cautioning that she hasn't said yes yet. She wants to read the script and be sure that she's absolutely happy with it. It's kind of a departure, though, isn't it, for an actress who does things like Little Women and Midsommar. She's kind of into those sort of indie, apart from obviously the Marvel films like Black Widow. The other issue, of course, that could be facing her, which we discussed last week, is if she's cast to play Madonna, how on earth is she going to find time to shoot an epic like Dune? But if she does appear in Dune, her character is going to be somewhat romantically involved, or involved in a complicated way with Timothée Chalamet's character. And another casting choice that looks likely for Dune Part 2 is Austin Butler, who we've only just recently seen in the Elvis trailer, looking incredibly like him, sounding incredibly like him, and being able to shake his booty and flicker his front leg and the contents of his crutch beautifully. Never thought I'd say that sentence. So yeah, the star of Elvis, Austin Butler, is in talks to play, I don't know if I'm going to pronounce this name correctly, Fade Rother, who was previously played in David Lynch's version by Sting. He's a favourite apparently among the fans, and he's the nephew and heir of Baron Vladimir Harkonnen, who was played by one of the Skarsgårds, wasn't he, with that great flabby head and no legs and floating around, really horrible. So yeah, Austin Butler's going to be in that. And apparently I didn't realise his breakout role was in Once Upon a Time in Hollywood. And we can also look forward to seeing him in the Band of Brothers spin-off, Masters of the Air, which I think Spielberg is attached to. Here's a first look image. There, of Tom Hanks. Tom Hanks gets about, doesn't he? Bloody hell, he never stops. He's constantly popping up. He's in the Elvis trailer with an enormous prosthetic cheeks and chin. He was somewhere else recently, and he was somewhere else recently. He does seem to be popping up all over the place. Tom Hanks is in Robert Zemeckis' new Pinocchio. So Robert Zemeckis, the director, has been around for years. He gave us Back to the Future. He gave us The Polar Express. He gave us all sorts of things. He gave us Forrest Gump. So he's working with Tom Hanks in Disney's live-action version of Pinocchio. Obviously, Tom Hanks, what part do you think he's playing? He's not playing Pinocchio, he's playing Geppetto, absolutely, as you can see in this image. It's a curious one. I mean, we've talked a lot about live-action remakes of Disney classics. Pinocchio is a funny one. It gets made an awful lot, and I don't know whether it's the kind of haunting quality of the puppet, but I have to say, and I'm going to be honest here, I've never really liked it. I've always found it a bit lacking. I don't know. I don't really care for Pinocchio, and I don't know whether that's because he's quite wooden or because he's made of wood. But yeah, I'm not a particularly massive fan. I'll be curious to know how they realise the character of Jiminy Cricket. Because I mean, you know, that image of Jiminy Cricket and some of his most famous songs are wondrous. And to be honest with you, I think when you've got Pinocchio, the original, I say it again and I say it many times, why do you need to do a remake? Also lining out the cast are Cynthia Erivo, Joseph Gordon-Levitt, Keegan-Michael Key, Lorraine Bracco, Luke Evans are all in the cast. So, I find it very hard to get excited about these sorts of things. It sort of feels a bit predictable. I feel like I know what I'm going to get, and I don't feel it's going to be very good. Now, this is exciting. If anyone saw The Batman, I don't think there's an enormous number of people who've gone to see The Batman. It hasn't done as well as other tentpoles like Spider-Man, Spider-Man No Way Home, or Far From Home, whatever it is. He's always doing something like Getting Home, Going Home, or Not at Home. This is a spin-off series that's been commissioned straight off the back of The Batman, which is doing well at the box office. I mean, it's doing incredibly well, but it's not doing as well as Spider-Man, recent Spider-Man. But HBO Max have ordered the spin-off series pivoting around, guess which character? Not the Riddler, that would be nice. Not the Joker, that would have been cool. Not Catwoman. That would have been interesting. No, around Colin Farrell's incredibly prostheticized face as the Penguin. And I think we said in our review that we felt we could have done more with him. He was a real wisecracking, he really manifested that sort of mobster, could potentially do anything. He had the strange penguin walk, which wasn't overdone actually. You didn't think, oh, he's waddling a bit too much like a penguin. It's obviously some issue that he's got with his legs, with his feet, or something like that. So, you know, one of these great villainous roles is going to be given a series. And, you know, all credit to Colin Farrell. I think he brought to some, very few scenes, he brought some real depth, humour and malevolence. You know, it's just like a real toxic masculinity sort of things going on there. HBO Max say of the project, Colin exploded off the screen, almost quite literally. I mean, he was so big he could have exploded as the Penguin in Batman, and having the chance to thoroughly explore the inner life of that character is an absolute thrill. HBO Max are thrilled, we're thrilled, I'm thrilled, I'm sure Colin Farrell's thrilled, and I'm sure his makeup department are absolutely thrilled at being able to recreate his jowls. Pete Davidson. Pete Davidson's in the news a lot, isn't he? Most notably at the moment, sadly for him, probably
one of the big
maybe castings. I don't know how they feel about this. But obviously he's been in the press a lot for being Kim Kardashian's new boyfriend. Obviously Kanye has been posting videos about threatening to chop his head off and drag him around and bury him. By all accounts, Pete Davidson saw the funny side of it. Pete Davidson is one of the longest serving members of the Saturday Night Live team. He's been there, I think, 8 years, and he was also the youngest ever, walk-on guests to come onto the show. So he's very much, he's got the Saturday Night Live runs through him like a stick of rock. I like that analogy, though I think Americans don't know what the hell it means. I don't know if you remember, there was a film during lockdown called King of Staten Island, and that film was very much based upon his own experiences. He lost his father, who was a firefighter in 9/11, and it pivoted around really that film. Do check it out, which is kind of about his stoner life and is he really doing anything meaningful and all that kind of stuff. So it was quite autobiographical. Well, in the year that's going to see Nick Cage as himself in The Unbearable Weight of Massive Talent, or whatever it's called, Pete Davidson is going to star as a fictional version of himself in a new series. Its working title is Bupkiss, and they're promising a raw, unflinching, fictionalized version of Pete Davidson's real life, including a mixture of grounded storytelling with absurd elements depicting an unfiltered view through Pete's eyes. I think the feeling and hope here is that it'll be somewhat like, I don't know, a sort of Curb Your Enthusiasm, but R-rated. I think this could be interesting. He takes on interesting parts. I always remember him saying in an interview, I want to be the modern day Steve Buscemi. I want to appear 4th, 5th or 6th on the credit roll, but bang in a really notable performance, which he does in something like The Suicide Squad. That said, I think he's very much sort of taking centre stage and is the star of most projects that he's in these days. Now, Crazy Rich Asians. I really wasn't a fan of Crazy Rich Asians. Now, as I say that, I recognise that it was an absolute moment, like Black Panther for the black community. Crazy Rich Asians was a moment where the Asian community of all varieties could have representation and have their story told in an accessible and mainstream manner. And for that, it has to be lauded, championed, etc. I just thought in its execution, it was really pedestrian and really obvious and not funny. That said, it made $250 million at the box office, and there's been much talk about there potentially being a Crazy Rich Asian sequel. I personally couldn't think of anything worse. I think there are better films to be made that tick the box of having represented the Asian community in a more meaningful way, or especially the American Asian community too. But Henry Golding, who's one of the stars in the film, has been talking about whether there will be a sequel, and he says, I always bug the director John Chu about it, and he tells me the same thing every time. We're trying to figure out the writing. Now that says to me it's not imminent in any way, shape or form, trying to figure out the writing. But in this interview, Henry Golding talks about the fact that he came in for a bit of stick for him being a Chinese Singaporean character, and whether he was the right ethnic, whether he had the right ethnic origin to play the part. And he made a really interesting point, because this often flags up, doesn't it? Should you play this part if you're not from this community? There's discussion recently about Helen Mirren, should she have been playing the Prime Minister of Israel if she's not Jewish, that kind of thing. But Henry Golding said this, I'm never going to play my exact race 100% of the time, unless there's a half Malaysian, half British character, then yeah, okay, like he said, that when is there ever a half Malaysian, half British character that requires a half Malaysian, half British character? Actor. He'd probably get one role in his life. Shouldn't be like that, but it's true. As he says, we're actors, and at the end of the day, bringing a discussion of race into a fictional character gets really old. I think he makes a fair point. I find him quite stilted as a performer. I find him quite wooden. What do you think? Were you a fan of Crazy Rich Asians? Could you tolerate? Would you enjoy a sequel? Which brings us to films of the week, and it's a curious week this week. I think because the Batman came out last weekend, it kind of casts a shadow over the box office for the week after it. So whatever's released this week isn't going to do much business because there's still loads of people catching up with Robert Pattinson's incarnation of Batman. But there is there's two films, one on Netflix, one at the cinema. The first one is Red Rocket. This comes from the director Sean Baker. He did the indie movies Tangerine and one of my favourite movies of all time, The Florida Project. If you haven't seen it, do check it out. Willem Dafoe in there and a whole bunch of amateur actors who've not performed before. Incredibly moving, visceral, urgent, living on the projects in the shadow of Disneyland and, making ends meet as a poor white family. But this film stars Simon Rex, who himself is an actor who's passed through the porn industry, and apparently he says he did porn in his early days in order to just pay the rent and get food for his girlfriend's 2-year-old son. This is essentially a story about, in a sense, what Simon Rex has been through. This tells the story of a former adult film actor as he goes back to his Texas town, and he sort of falls into all sorts of shit with ex-girlfriends, ex-wives, gets into fights, scraps, considers returning to the porn industry. It looks like, from the trailer, a very gritty, quite sort of documentarist and comedic and humorous take on a white male lead, which in a way, obviously we get lots of films with white male leads, but looking at the dilemmas that potentially face a working class white man, I think that'll be quite interesting. And the other film out this week is on Netflix. It's called The Adam Project, which is a sort of time-travelling Ryan Reynolds, directed by the same guy who did Free Guy, that great film set in a computer game, which I thought was brilliant and really innovative and really creative. He's a time-travelling fighter pilot, Adam Reed. He travels in time and finds his 12-year-old self, and then him and his 12-year-old self essentially fight to save the world. It's got quite a cast. Mark Ruffalo's in there, Jennifer Garner, Catherine Keener, and Zoe Saldana, who you'll know from Guardians of the Galaxy. So quite a cast. It'll be a bit of a romp. I'm hearing it's kind of a bit of 80s classic in there, so it might be a bit Stranger Thingsy going on, riffing on all those films that we loved in the 1980s. So those are your two films. There's your rushed rush through the weekly rushes. Tell us what you think of the stories, give us your feedback. Have a good week.
For more film and family fun, don't forget to click the subscribe button and make sure to click the bell to never miss an update.